Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. There are a lot of reasons to be high on this Ole Miss program heading into 2024. It's no secret the fellas are very high on this program, but Dale, it seems like a lot of the attention goes to this Ole Miss offense. Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, and what we just did a couple days ago, an episode on why we thought this Ole Miss wide receiver room might be the best in the country. What separates Ole Miss, what makes them special for me heading into 2024 is what they have along the line of scrimmages, specifically on that defensive line. They brought in two guys that are the definition of game wreckers in Walter Nolen and Princely U. Want to take a deep dive into the film of both Walter Nolen and Princely U, talk about what they bring to this Ole Miss defense. You talk about closing the gap. This is where I think that gap gets closed heading into 2024. Extremely excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the Ole Miss fans. The amount of love, the amount of support the Ole Miss fans have shown the boys over the last couple of weeks means the world. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, now I'm going to give you the T-box here. This Ole Miss defense, what makes them different heading into 2024?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just getting more of that top-end talent, because you've seen, like, Ole Miss, I think, has done a really good job under Lane Kiffin of building up a solid stable, a deeper room of, like, good, solid SEC linemen, but you haven't had those, like, first-round caliber guys, those real game changers. In Princely U, I mean, that's him. I'm stunned he's not in the NFL draft, frankly. And then you look at Walter Nolen, a guy who you've seen the flashes of. You've seen the first-round caliber play. There's a reason he was that high-end recruit. But, like, if they can get that out of him and have him play that first-round caliber football, like, that's what changes to me. Because, again, you look at guys like J.J. Pegas, Jared Ivey, Cedric Johnson, like, good, solid football players for sure, really kind of, like, fit in the SEC, but they just didn't have that real game wrecker.
Yeah, you look at the Georgias and the Alabamas, right? Alabama, Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, Georgia, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis. They've had those difference makers up front. I think Ole Miss has those difference makers heading into the 2024 season. Dill, I would be remiss to not shout out Suntarine Perkins as well as, I mean, I know you love him. The Ole Miss fans know I love him. This is a guy that's the ultimate chess piece. You talk about another first-round caliber guy that is in your front seven, however you decide to use them. They got some game records. Now,
yeah, I saw Suntarine Perkins chasing down Jalen Milroe. I mean, you just different. Like that next year he's got it. You're right. It is different from what Ole Miss had. And again, it's not to say Ole Miss, like, they're in the top half of the SEC for sure. They've placed themselves squarely there. And they've taken that next step. It will be about having 3 to 4 of those guys who, like, you just look, they look a little different even for the SEC. You need some of that. I think that's what they brought in this year. That's what's got me really excited for them, because they've always had the high-end skill on offense. Now I think they do have a couple of those guys on defense who can really make differences.
Now, I want to get into Princely U first. This is a guy that we were talking before this. I'm surprised he didn't go to the NFL draft. I probably would have taken him with the top 100 pick. You talk about pure pass rushers. Princely U might be one of the best in the country. This is a guy that 28 quarterback hurries, Dill, a 21% pass rush win rate, one of the best in the country when it comes to pinning his ears back, getting after the quarterback. There's not many better, and I want to dive into what makes Princely U such an elite pass rusher at the college football level. And Dill, for me, it starts with what he can do challenging tackles with his athleticism and how he can kind of get the edge on opposing tackles. You pull up the film here. First rep, Princely U, not only the burst off the line of scrimmage, but the ability to bend and be flexible around this tackle. You fire up the film. I mean, there are not many tackles that can deal with that burst off the line of scrimmage and then the ability to have the flexibility in your ankles and in your hips to dip below this offensive tackle, get in the backfield. This is a guy that wins with pure speed repeatedly on the film, but what makes Princely U so dangerous and what makes him one of the best pass rushers in the country is he really builds off that, right? Not only does he have that elite ability to win on the outside shoulder, he starts throwing some other things in that really throw offensive tackles off their game and just gives them a lot to handle, right? We just saw him beat that left tackle clean on the edge. Now you're going to see him on a couple plays later. I mean, he's going to be working on an inside move, and he's got that tackle set up, so he's protecting that edge. Princely working on the inside, getting after the passer, and then kind of the cherry on top for Princely U, and kind of highlighting the deep bag of pass rush moves and pass rush tricks that he has is just speed to power, right? When you are able to test tackles on that outside shoulder kind of consistently, it opens you up to just going right through tackles as well. You fire up the film here. Tackle setting outside. He doesn't want to get beat on that outside shoulder. You take a look at this Vanderbilt film. He has this tackle swimming in water pretty much the whole game. He's going to just go speed the power here on this left tackle, put him right into the lap of the quarterback, winning outside, winning inside, winning with speed to power right through tackles. All things that Princely U can do, and I think that's kind of what separates him as an elite pass rusher in the SEC.
And I think what you see there, it's about winning clean. It's about getting sack numbers. Because, again, we talk about guys like Ivy, Cedric Johnson, really productive players. I mean, 5-6 sacks each last year, but they win a little bit different. I mean, they win, they're disruptive, they collapse pockets, they're big, strong, more of that kind of physical brand at the end. But they weren't guys who are going to go get you 10-plus sacks. They just didn't have that kind of top year. And it's not to say you don't want those guys, because you want disruptive pass rushers. You want guys who play really tough against the run, which is what Jared Ivey does. But you need, I think you need a guy like Princely U, a guy who you can just say, well, if you're going to block me one-on-one, I'm going to win. I'm going to win clean. I'm going to set up my opportunities for strip sacks, all those huge plays that, again, you kind of think about what makes the difference between Ole Miss and Alabama this year. It's one or two plays like that they needed that. And there were at times you felt like they didn't have that top tier guy to do it, or enough of them to do it. I'd really like to think Princely U kind of gives them, again, what we were talking about.
They need those game changers, right? Those game-changing plays, those plays that win you those big football games. Still, it's important to remind people, this Ole Miss team lost 2 games. They were both on the road. They were both to some of the best teams in the country in Alabama and Georgia. That gap's getting smaller.
It was small because it wasn't even like the Georgia game. I know it got out of hand towards the end, obviously, but like you could see for the first handful of series, I mean, it's not that far away. Again, it's just like you needed like some of those guys who kind of make the difference on the field. And again, that's kind of what makes me feel a little different, is Ole Miss has always been transfer U in a sense. They transfer to the SIP, all the things Lane Kiffin likes to talk about. And they've brought in good transfers, but they haven't brought in transfers like these two.
And the next one we got to talk about is Walter Nolen, Walter Nolen, I think what excites me the most is you turn on the film from 2023, you see the flashes, you want to see it a little bit more consistently. I think you've only seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of how dominant Walter Nolen can be at the SEC level. You kind of look at what Walter Nolen does well. One, a lot of development in terms of how to get off blocks. You look at that Michigan defensive line. What made them so special up front was their ability to disengage, use their hands. Walter Nolen right here working against probably one of the best centers in the country in Matt Lee from Miami. He's going to, hold his own. 2, I'm going to get off this block and I'm going to make my play at the point of attack. One thing that stands out to me, Walter Nolen, his average depth of tackle, 1.2 yards down the field. He wins at the point of attack. He's able to get disengaged and make those plays. You kind of fire up some more film, Dill. Walter Nolen working as an edge rusher right now doesn't make the play on this rep, but he kind of flashes what you're so excited about for Walter Nolen. Not many guys can take a Auburn right tackle at the SEC level and really just dominate him like Walter Nolen's doing, right? This right tackle just getting beat off the spot. That kind of gives you the sense of how special Walter Nolen is and the power that he has in his hands. And then the last rep, you're talking about a guy, and it's rare to see defensive linemen on the inside be able to be as disruptive in the pass rush. And they'll, quite frankly, something that almost didn't get a ton of last year, right? A guy like J.J. Pegas, love him against the run, maybe not the best pass rusher on the inside. Walter Nolen brings that type of juice. You're going to run him on a little bit of a stunt. Not many D tackles have that ability to bend, to be disruptive, to get into the backfield. This is a guy that you can get involved in the pass rush in a lot of different ways, and I think Ole Miss is really going to benefit from that in 2024.
And again, it goes back to those like plays that you just feel a little different about it. It's not just like you're running the mill being able to hold up at the point of attack, letting your linebackers run clean. I mean, again, I thought Ole Miss, frankly, did a pretty decent job of that. They had defensive linemen who I wouldn't say were getting pushed around last year, but you look at some of those plays from Walter Nolan. I mean, they didn't have defensive linemen who could explode through offensive guards and run them back into the backfield clean. I mean, that type play, again, to me, it's like you get 3-4 more of those a game. Those Georgia game, that Alabama game, you might be talking about different stories. You just have more horsepower with this transfer class than I think you had last year. And that, to me, that's all that Ole Miss needed to do. I don't think they needed a revamp. They're on a really good path, but they need those top tier.
So we talk about difference makers. I think we know Ole Miss has those guys. I think another thing that stands out when you look at this depth chart is the depth that they have on the defensive line as well. Going back to some of the elite defenses that we've seen over the last couple of years, Georgia, Michigan this year, what made them special is not only having that top-end talent that Ole Miss certainly has with guys like Princely U and Walter Nolan, it's also the depth that they've developed. Right? You got to keep guys fresh for 4 quarters, for 15 games of a season. You look at this lineup, right? Princely U, Walter Nolan, JJ on the inside, Jared Ivey, very, very good starting defensive line. You're talking about a guy, a true freshman like Cam Franklin, who I am extremely high on, guy like Xavier Harris, Akello Stone. Those are your guys that are kind of working in the 2 deep for that Ole Miss team. Those guys are starters on a lot of other programs across the country. Not only do they have that top-end talent, they also have a ton of depth, and that is massively important, especially when you're trying to do what Ole Miss is trying to do, and that is make a run in the postseason, compete for SEC championships, compete for college football playoff wins. I think this depth is certainly going to allow them to do that.
And I think you're right, because I don't want this episode to come off as saying like, oh, Ole Miss's defensive line was like trash last year. I mean, again, no. JJ Pegas, Xavier Harris, I thought played really good for a true sophomore. Like Hello Stone, really solid player. It's like these guys are good SEC football players, but again, there's a difference between being good SEC football player and a Princely U. I mean, Princely U's at a level that's just, it is a little different than even your good defensive ends. And to me, that's all they needed. Because I don't agree with these people who say like Ole Miss hasn't done a decent job of developing guys through their program. I think they have done a really good job. Again, they just need more of those top end guys, like Lane was saying. And this year, it looks like they're making a real effort to do it, because you look at some of the guys they brought in, both on offense and on defense. I mean, they brought in those like real game changers.
And one more thing I would note is I love how this defensive line balances each other out. Like, you got a lot of guys that thrive and do a lot of different things at a high level. JJ Pegas, that's a guy that you know is going to sit in 2 gaps. He's going to take on double teams. He's going to win at the point of attack. Maybe not necessarily the top-end pass rusher. Well, you bring in Walter Nolan, a guy that can be a top-end pass rusher from the inside. You look at some of your edge play. Jared Ivey, very strong at the point of attack, very good as a run defender. Princely, but maybe not a top-end pass rusher. Then you look at Princely U, maybe some strides to be taken as a run defender, but you look at Princely U as a pass rusher, elite kind of guy. It balances each other out as well. You kind of got guys that thrive and do a lot of different things well. This is an Ole Miss defensive line that I am extremely excited about. It's talented at the top. It's got depth in the 2 and 3 deep. That's how you want your defensive lines looking heading into a college football season, especially in the SEC. And you talk about how Ole Miss has closed the gap. I think it's along the line of scrimmage. I think it's on this defensive line. Fire me up for 2024. Y'all know how I feel about Ole Miss. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.